Some buildings hold their secrets in stone. Others press them into the walls, into the floors, into the air itself so thick you can taste it the moment you step inside. Ashmore Estate Psychiatric Hospital was that kind of building. And in the spring of 1987, 5 people walked through its front doors and did not come back out. Not all of them anyway. This is not a ghost story. Ghost stories are comfortable. They have rules. The dead appear, they speak, they frighten, and eventually they fade. What happened inside Ashmore Estates does not fade. It does not follow rules. And for 37 years, the recordings that captured what those 5 people experienced inside those walls were locked behind a court order sealed by the state of Illinois under a legal provision that has never been fully explained to the public. Last year, a man named Daniel Voss uploaded 7 audio files to a private server. He was 26 years old, working a night shift at a data recovery company in Champaign. He had found the files in a shoebox beneath his grandmother's bed 2 weeks after her funeral. His grandmother was Margaret Voss. She had worked as a senior nurse at Ashmore Estates from 1971 until the hospital closed in 1981. She had kept those tapes for 43 years and told no one. Daniel did not know what he had, not at first. He listened to the first 30 seconds of the first tape and called his older brother. His brother listened for 2 minutes and drove to his apartment without hanging up the phone. By morning, they had listened to all 7 files. By the end of the week, Daniel had posted them online not to go viral, he said later. He posted them because he was afraid. He was afraid that if something happened to him, no one would ever know what his grandmother had known. Within 48 hours, the files had been shared over 11,000 times. Within 72 hours, Daniel Voss received a phone call from a number registered to a law firm in Springfield, Illinois. They told him the recordings were protected under an ongoing legal order. They told him he was in violation of federal statutes. They told him the files needed to be removed immediately. Daniel Voss took the files down, but it was already too late. The recordings existed now in hundreds of archived copies across dozens of servers. The silence that the state of Illinois had purchased in 1987 had finally broken. What is on those tapes is not easy to describe. It is not simply frightening. It is the kind of material that changes the way you think about institutions, about the places society builds to contain what it does not understand, and about what those places become when no one is watching. Ashmore Estate Psychiatric Hospital was abandoned in 1981 after a series of incidents. The state classified as administrative failures. It sat empty for 6 years. It should have stayed empty. The state-ordered inspection of 1987 was never publicly announced. There was no press release, no public record filed at the time of the visit. The 5 members of the inspection team were not identified in any publicly accessible document until a journalist named Clara Rosen filed a Freedom of Information request in 2019. Even then, the names of 3 team members remained redacted. Only 2 names were ever confirmed: Harold Greer, a licensed building inspector from Decatur, and Susan Mallory, a state health department official based in Springfield. Greer and Mallory were the 2 who came out. The other 3 were never identified by name in any official document. They are referred to in the court filings only as Subject A, Subject B, and Subject C. Their families, if they were ever contacted, were never reported on. No death certificates were filed. No missing persons reports exist in the public record. 3 people entered a building in the spring of 1987, and they simply ceased to exist on paper. That is where the tapes begin. To understand what the inspection team walked into, you have to understand what Ashmore Estates actually was, not what the brochures from 1962 described, and not what the state's official closing documents stated. You have to understand the building as it existed by the time those 5 people stood at its entrance on a gray April morning. Ashmore Estates was built in 1915 on a stretch of farmland in Coles County, Illinois. From the road, it looked like a manor house. Red brick, tall windows, wide front steps with iron railings. There were trees planted along the entrance path, oak and elm, and in the warmer months they formed a canopy of leaves so dense that the building disappeared behind them. Visitors sometimes describe the approach as peaceful. That word appears in the hospital's own promotional materials from the 1940s and 1950s. Peaceful. What those materials did not describe was the East Wing. The East Wing was constructed in 1931 during the hospital's first major expansion. It was built to house patients classified as criminally insane, a legal category at the time that included not only violent offenders, but also individuals committed by family members, individuals deemed socially disruptive, and in documented cases, individuals whose only recorded offense was refusing to speak. The East Wing had no windows below the third floor. Its corridors were 14 feet wide and painted the gray of old concrete. The ceiling tiles were reinforced with wire mesh. The doors were steel. By 1960, Ashmore Estates held over 300 patients. By 1970, despite declining admissions nationally, it held 412. The East Wing had been expanded twice more. The basement levels there were two had been converted from storage to residential use. Patients were housed in underground rooms with no natural light, no ventilation beyond a mechanical system installed in 1944, and no access to the upper floors without staff escort. These rooms had numbers, not names. Room B7, Room B12, Room B19. The records from those rooms were never fully digitized. Nurses who worked the basement levels in the late 1970s described a particular quality to the air down there. Not simply stale, but heavy, weighted. One nurse wrote in a personal journal later recovered by researchers, like breathing through wet cloth. The fluorescent lights flickered constantly. The mechanical ventilation system produced a low hum that you stopped noticing after the first week and then couldn't sleep without. Patients in the basement units had higher rates of self-harm, higher rates of psychotic episodes, higher rates of what the staff logs called spontaneous aggression. The administration attributed this to the nature of the patient population. The nurses had other theories. The hospital closed officially on March 3, 1981. The stated reason was budget restructuring. An internal state memo obtained through a records request in 2021 gives a different picture. The memo references without elaboration a series of incidents between October 1980 and February 1981 involving staff in the East Wing and two patients in the basement level. The incidents are not described. The memo recommends closure and describes the recommendation as urgent. It is signed by 3 officials, 2 of whose names are redacted. The third name is partially legible. The surname begins with a V. Between 1981 and 1987, Ashmore Estate sat vacant. The county maintained a basic security arrangement, a single guard, rotating shifts, checking the perimeter. There were no incidents reported in the security logs, or rather there were no incidents that made it into the final compiled logs. A former security guard named Roy Aldis gave an interview in 2003 to a local historical society in which he described 2 occasions during his shifts when he heard sounds from inside the building. He said they did not sound like animals. He said they did not sound like the wind. He said he reported them to his supervisor both times. He said he was told to note them as environmental disturbance and move on. By April of 1987, the building had been empty for 6 years. 6 years of Illinois winters and summers. 6 years of no heating, no cooling, no maintenance. The oak and elm trees along the entrance path had grown wild. Their roots had cracked the pavement. The iron railings on the front steps had oxidized to a deep reddish brown, the color, one journalist later wrote, of old blood. The windows on the upper floors had been sealed with boards that had since warped and split. Some of them had fallen away entirely, leaving the windows open to whatever the years had sent inside. This was the building that Harold Greer, Susan Mallory, and 3 unnamed individuals approached on the morning of April 14, 1987. The first tape begins as they enter through the main front door. The door, according to the building schematics filed with the county, was supposed to be locked. In the recording, you can hear it open without resistance. No key, no forced entry. It simply opens. No one on the tape comments on this. Harold Greer was 51 years old in April of 1987. He had been a licensed building inspector for 23 years, working primarily on commercial and institutional structures across central Illinois. People who knew him described him as methodical, dry-humored, and deeply skeptical of anything he could not measure or document. His wife Patricia said in a statement released through her attorney in 2024 following the release of the tapes that Harold had not wanted to take the job. He had been asked specifically, she said, not assigned. Asked. By someone in the state office he refused to name even to her. Susan Mallory was 44. She had worked for the state health department for 16 years and had conducted inspections at dozens of closed or abandoned medical facilities. Colleagues described her as meticulous and calm under pressure. She had 2 children. Her older son, James, was the one who identified her voice on the recordings after Daniel Voss released them. James Mallory gave a brief statement to a podcast in late 2024. He said hearing his mother's voice on those tapes was the worst experience of his adult life. He did not explain why. He has not spoken publicly since. The 3 others, Subject A, Subject B, Subject C, remain unconfirmed. Listeners who have analyzed the tapes have noted that Subject A is a man with a low, even voice, and what sounds like a slight regional accent, possibly from the Chicago area. Subject B appears to be a woman, younger than Mallory, who speaks rarely in the first 3 tapes and almost not at all after the 4th. Subject C is male, speaks frequently in the early recordings, and is the one who appears to be operating the primary recording device. It is Subject C who narrates the conditions of the building as the team moves through the ground floor. His voice is steady at first. He describes the entrance hall marble floor cracked along the central seam, ceiling plaster fallen in sections, the smell of standing water, and something else he describes as chemical, like cleaning fluid left too long in a closed space. He notes the reception desk to the left, still intact, the surface covered in a thin film of gray dust. He notes the wall-mounted clock above the desk. It is stopped at 4:77. He does not say whether it is morning or afternoon. Harold Greer speaks next. He comments on the structural integrity of the entrance hall ceiling, notes that 2 of the support beams have shown visible stress fractures, classifies them as non-critical for short-term occupancy. He is precise. He sounds like a man who has walked into 100 abandoned buildings and found them all boring. His voice has a particular flatness to it, the kind that comes not from indifference, but from long practice at controlling what you show. Susan Mallory is quieter in these early recordings. She asks twice about the basement access. The first time, Subject C tells her they'll get to it. The second time, Harold Greer says, and this is one of the lines that listeners have returned to repeatedly, he says, "Let's see what the upstairs gives us first." His tone does not change, but there is a pause before he says it. A pause of perhaps 2 seconds. In a recording like this, 2 seconds is a long time. Subject A does not speak in the first tape at all. You can hear him. His footsteps are distinct, heavier than the others, with a slight drag on the left foot. He stays close to Susan Mallory throughout the ground floor walk. At one point, when the group pauses in what the team identifies as the old administrative corridor, you can hear Subject A exhale slowly. It is not the exhale of exertion. It is the exhale of someone practicing control. Subject B, the younger woman, speaks once in the first tape. The group has reached the door to the east wing. The door is steel, heavy, and according to Harold Greer's notes, should be secured by a padlock listed in the county property management records. The padlock is present. It is not locked. It is hanging open on the hasp, as though someone recently passed through and could not be bothered to secure it behind them. Subject B says, quietly, clearly, "Someone has been in here." The rest of the group goes silent. Then Subject C says, "Let's note it and move on." And they do. They move through the East Wing corridor. Subject C continues his narration, peeling paint, water damage along the upper walls, the sound of something dripping somewhere above them. He identifies what he believes to be mold colonies on the ceiling panels. Harold Greer disagrees with his classification, says it looks more like residue. They have a brief professional exchange about it. Their voices are normal. They sound like 2 men arguing about a spreadsheet. Then Subject C stops speaking mid-sentence. There is a sound on the tape. It lasts approximately 4 seconds. It comes from somewhere ahead of them down the East Wing corridor in the direction of the wardrooms. Later acoustic analysts who examined the recordings described it as low frequency, rhythmic, and inconsistent with any known mechanical source in the building. One analyst said it most closely resembled a human voice repeating a single syllable at a very slow, deliberate pace. The analyst declined to speculate further. Another analyst simply wrote in her report, "Origin undetermined." After the sound, no one speaks for 11 seconds. Then Harold Greer says, "Keep moving." They keep moving. The second tape begins without preamble. The team is already moving. Subject C's narration has become shorter, more clipped. He notes room numbers as they pass East 7, East 9, East 11. He notes that the room doors are all open. All of them, down the entire length of the East Wing corridor. Every single door stands open at the same angle, approximately 45 degrees. Harold Greer observes this. He says, probably the settling. No one agrees with him out loud. Inside East 11, the team stops. This is the first room they enter. Subject C describes it carefully. A single metal bed frame against the left wall, the mattress removed, the springs exposed and rusted. A wooden chair in the corner, one leg shorter than the others, propped against the wall at a slight angle. A window not boarded on this one, overlooking what had been the hospital garden. The garden is visible through the glass. It has gone completely wild. Weeds and tall grass pressed flat in circular patterns, as though something heavy had been rotating slowly across the ground. Harold Greer photographs the room. Susan Mallory takes notes. Subject A stands in the doorway and does not enter. It is in this room that Susan Mallory finds the first anomaly. On the wall above the bed frame, scratched directly into the plaster, not written in pen or marker, scratched with something sharp, possibly a fingernail. There is a series of marks. She reads them aloud for the recording. They are not words, they are not letters, not in any standard alphabet. They are a pattern, a repeating pattern. Mallory counts them, 31 repetitions of the same sequence. She asks if anyone recognizes the symbol. No one answers. Harold Greer photographs the marks. He classifies them in his running narration as patient vandalism, preclosure. Subject B, who has barely spoken, says, "The plaster is new." A silence. Greer says, "What?" Subject B says, "Under the scratches. The plaster underneath is newer than the surrounding wall. Someone replastered this room after the hospital closed, and then something was scratched into the fresh plaster. She does not say by whom." The team leaves East 11 and continues down the corridor. The sound from earlier, the low rhythmic frequency, does not return, but something else does. From the third tape onward, there is a persistent background noise that the acoustic analysts have struggled to categorize. It is not quite static. It is not quite silence. Several people who have listened to the recordings describe it as the sound you hear when you press your palms against your ears, that internal biological pressure. But it is coming from the recording itself, from the building, from the air. It gets louder as the team moves toward the East Wing's northern end. They reach the stairwell. Harold Greer confirms the structural integrity of the stairs' sound. No critical damage. The team descends to the first basement level. The mechanical ventilation is not running. The basement is completely still. Subject C notes the temperature change significantly colder than the upper floor. He estimates a drop of 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Harold Greer says the building's insulation would not account for that differential. Neither man offers an alternative explanation. The first basement level holds storage rooms, a laundry facility, and what the old floor plans designate as the staff break room. The break room has not been emptied. The table is still there, chairs still pushed in. There are cups on the table, 3 of them. The tea inside them, if it was ever tea, has long since evaporated, but the residue rings are still visible on the inside of the cups. Someone sat here and drank something and then left and never came back for the cups. Subject C notes all of this. His voice has lost its professional flatness. He sounds careful now, very careful. At the far end of the first basement level, there is a door that does not appear on the floor plans. Harold Greer notes this explicitly. He cross-references the county schematics he has brought with him and confirms this door should not be here. It is a steel door, heavier than the East Wing doors above, with no handle on the exterior side. There is a seam where the door meets the frame. The seam is not perfectly even. The door has been opened recently enough that the dust on the floor shows a clean arc where the base of the door swept. Susan Mallory says, "We should document this and come back with the right clearance." Harold Greer agrees. He photographs the door. Subject C notes the time, 11:47 a.m. They turn to go back toward the stairwell. Subject B does not move. She is standing very still, facing the door. Subject A says, his first words on any of the recordings, he says, "She's listening." No one asks to what. The background hum on the recording peaks sharply for approximately 3 seconds and then drops back to its baseline. Subject B turns around. They go upstairs. On tape 4, the team reaches the second basement level through a separate access point, a narrow stairwell at the east end of the first basement. behind the laundry facility, not marked on the county plans either. The second basement is different. The corridor is wider, 12 feet, perhaps 14. The ceiling is higher. The rooms down here are larger. They are not numbered. They have names. The names are written in black paint directly on the door frames, in block letters: evaluation, observation, processing, containment. The last door at the end of the corridor has no name. It is larger than the others. It is sealed not with a padlock but with a heavy bolt mechanism, industrial, the kind used in cold storage facilities or secure evidence rooms. Subject C notes that the bolt mechanism appears new, not 1981 new, recent. Harold Greer does not say anything for 43 seconds. What happens next on the recordings has been the subject of more analysis, more debate, more sleepless nights than any other element of the Ashmore tapes. The fifth tape begins with movement, rapid, urgent movement, footsteps on the basement corridor floor, more than 5 sets, which means someone else is down there. Subject C's narration drops away entirely. Harold Greer is saying something, but his voice is low and his mouth sounds like it's close to the recording device, as though he's whispering directly into it. He says, "Do not run." He says it twice. "Do not run. Do not run. Do not run." His voice is steady, but something underneath it is not. It is the voice of a man who is applying everything he has to keeping himself together. Then Subject B screams. It is brief, less than 2 seconds, and then it cuts off. Not gradually. It cuts off with the sharpness of a switch thrown. The silence that follows is absolute. The background hum is gone. The dripping from above is gone. Everything is gone except the sound of breathing. 4 distinct patterns of breathing. 4 distinct patterns of breathing. 4, not 5. Subject C begins to speak again. He does not acknowledge the scream. His voice is different, now higher, tighter, the words coming faster. He describes what he can see. He says the door at the end of the corridor, the large sealed door, is open. He says the bolt mechanism is on the floor. He says the door is open, and there is light coming from inside. Not the artificial fluorescent light of the corridor. A different quality of light, warmer, amber almost, like the light you see through a window at dusk. He says there should not be any light source down here capable of producing that color. Harold Greer tells him to stop describing and start moving toward the stairwell. They begin to move, and then on the tape, clearly, unmistakably, they hear a voice from inside the open room. The voice is not one of theirs. It is speaking at a normal conversational volume, as though reading from something. The acoustic analysts cannot determine gender, cannot determine age, cannot isolate the language with certainty. 2 analysts believe it is English spoken with an archaic grammatical structure. 1 analyst believes it is not English at all. 1 analyst submitted her report and then withdrew from the case entirely, citing personal reasons. Subject A, who has spoken only once in all of the preceding recordings, begins to say something. He gets approximately 6 words out. The tape captures only the end of whatever he was saying. Always been here. That is all. Always been here. Then his footsteps stop. The other 3 keep moving. You can hear them. You can hear 3 sets of footsteps accelerating toward the stairwell, and 1 set that simply stops. The 5th tape ends there. The 6th tape is 11 minutes long. Harold Greer and Susan Mallory are speaking on the ground floor near the entrance. Their voices are shaking. Subject C is still with them. His narration continues in fragments, disjointed but present. He says they are at the main entrance. He says the time is 2:19 p.m. He says Subject A and Subject B are not with them. He does not say why. Susan Mallory is on what sounds like a radio or early cellular device, repeating a location, repeating a request for assistance. She keeps saying, "We need to come out now. We need to come out now." Someone on the other end keeps asking her to confirm what happened below. She says, "I cannot confirm." She says this 7 times. "I cannot confirm." Harold Greer says something that has been transcribed by multiple independent listeners, and the transcription is consistent across all of them. He says, "Whatever was in that room knew we were coming." He pauses. Then he says, "It had been waiting." The 6th tape ends. The 7th tape is 40 seconds long. It was recorded separately from the others, different acoustic quality, different ambient sound, no voices, no footsteps. It is simply a recording of a room that breathes. That is the only way to describe it. The room on that recording has a rhythm. It expands and contracts the background. Sound rises and falls with the regularity of a sleeping body. For 40 seconds, a room breathes, and then the tape ends. Harold Greer died in 2009. His wife Patricia has confirmed that he never spoke about the inspection to his children, never wrote about it, and in the last years of his life asked her twice to make sure that if she found anything from 1987 among his belongings, she would destroy it. She did not find anything. She has said publicly that she does not know whether she is relieved or not. Susan Mallory left the State Health Department in August of 1987, 4 months after the inspection. She moved to a small town in Vermont and worked for a landscaping company for the remainder of her career. Her son James has confirmed that she never spoke about Ashmore, not once, not in any context, for the 37 years between April of 1987 and her death in 2024. She died 2 weeks before Daniel Voss found the tapes under his grandmother's bed. The timing of that Margaret Voss's death and then the discovery of what she had kept is something that Daniel has spoken about only once. He said, "I don't think she wanted me to find them while she was alive. I think she needed someone to know, but she couldn't be the one to say it out loud." He paused. He said, "I think she was afraid that saying it out loud would bring it back." In the weeks following the release of the tapes, a coalition of researchers, investigative journalists, and independent acoustic analysts released a joint statement. They had collectively spent over 400 hours analyzing the 7 recordings. Their conclusions were as follows. The recordings were authentic, showing no signs of digital manipulation. The voices identified as Harold Greer and Susan Mallory were confirmed through comparison with other audio sources. The third unidentified voice, Subject C, could not be matched to any known individual in any public database. Subjects A and B were never identified. The state of Illinois did not issue a public statement. The law firm that contacted Daniel Voss sent a second letter. He has not disclosed its contents. He says only that he was advised, strongly, to stop discussing the matter. He has not stopped. He says his grandmother spent 43 years carrying something she was never meant to carry alone, and the least he can do is make sure the weight gets distributed. The building itself, Ashmore Estates, was demolished in 1994. This is a matter of public record. The county authorized the demolition for safety reasons, citing structural deterioration. The demolition was completed over 3 days in October of that year. Local residents reported that the crew hired for the job quit twice before completion. The contractor who finished the work has never given an interview. He is still alive. Several journalists have tried to contact him. He has not responded to any of them. The land where Ashmore Estate stood is now a public park. There is a small parking area, a gravel path, some wooden benches. A historical marker was installed in 2007. It describes the hospital's founding in 1915 and its closure in 1981. It mentions the East Wing. It does not mention what was in the basement. It does not mention what was in the inspection team of 1987. It does not mention Subject A, Subject B, or the door at the end of the second basement corridor with the heavy bolt mechanism on the floor. People walk their dogs there on Sunday mornings. Children ride bicycles along the gravel path. In the winter, when the ground freezes, there is sometimes a sound reported by people who live near the park. A low, rhythmic frequency heard through the walls of their houses in the hours before dawn. The county has investigated twice. The first time, they attributed it to subsidence, the natural settling of ground above a filled foundation. The second time, the investigator filed a report that described the sound as, quote, consistent with mechanical activity below grade level. He recommended further investigation. The county did not fund further investigation. Margaret Voss Daniel's grandmother began working at Ashmore Estates in 1971. The tapes she kept were not from the inspection team. The tapes she kept were something else entirely. This is the detail that receives the least attention in most discussions of the Ashmore case, but it is perhaps the most significant. Daniel Voss found 7 tapes under his grandmother's bed. Only 4 of them contain the inspection recordings. The other 3 are from an earlier period. They are dated in handwriting on the cassette labels, 1978, 1979, 1980. Those 3 tapes have not been released. Daniel Voss has stated that he has listened to them once and will not listen to them again. He has stated that he has made copies and given them to 3 separate people with instructions to release them publicly in the event that something happens to him. He has been asked in every interview, what is on those tapes? He gives the same answer every time. He says, they recorded things in the basement that they were not supposed to record. He says, there are sounds on those tapes that I cannot explain, and I have spent a year trying. He says, my grandmother worked there for 10 years, and when I listen to what she recorded, I understand why she never talked about it. I understand why she kept it, and I understand why she never destroyed it. When asked why she never destroyed it, he is quiet for a moment. Then he says, because she thought someone needed to know. And I think he stops. I think she also kept it because she was afraid that destroying it would mean they had won. Whatever they were, whatever is still down there. A team of independent geologists was hired in 2024 by a documentary production company to conduct a non-invasive survey of the land where Ashmore Estates once stood. They used ground-penetrating radar. The survey took 2 days. On the second day, the lead geologist halted the survey and the team packed their equipment and left. The production company released a statement saying the project had been canceled for budgetary reasons. The lead geologist gave no public statement. One member of the survey team, a junior technician, 23 years old, posted a brief message to a private online forum before deleting it. The message was screenshotted and circulated. It said, the radar found something. It's not a foundation. It's not pipes. It's not geological. We don't know what it is. The shape of it goes down much further than any basement should go. And when we were scanning it, the readings changed, like something moved. The post was deleted within an hour. The technician's account was deactivated. His name has not been confirmed. The park is open every day from dawn to dusk. The benches face west. On clear evenings, the light comes in low and amber through the trees at the edge of the property, trees that were planted after the demolition, that have grown fast and dense, as though fed by something generous in the soil. Dogs refuse to go near the western edge of the park, near where the east wing used to stand. Their owners laugh about it, mostly. They chalk it up to the animal sense for things humans have learned to ignore. The last entry in Margaret Voss's personal journal, undated, written in a hand that had grown shaky with age, reads as follows. Daniel transcribed it himself and shared it in a single social media post that he has since left up, undelated, as the only permanent record of his grandmother's voice. I kept the tapes because I thought one day someone would ask the right question. The question is not what happened to the people who went in. The question is, what was already there before any of us arrived? What was there when they built the East Wing? What was there when they sealed the basement? What is there still? I am old now, and I am not afraid of dying. I am afraid of being forgotten before I have been understood. I was a nurse. I cared for people. I also saw what we kept beneath them. I hope whoever finds this is braver than I was. I hope they ask the question out loud. No one has asked the question out loud. The park closes at dusk. By the time the last visitor leaves, the light is gone, and the trees are dark, and the ground is still. And somewhere beneath the gravel path and the wooden benches and the carefully maintained grass, beneath the filled foundation and whatever the radar found that the geologist refused to describe, something continues at its own pace, in its own time, as it has continued for longer than anyone currently alive has been alive to know. It is not waiting. Waiting implies an end. It is simply there, and it has always been there.